What up, Coordination? How you doing? On the pod today, we have DAO Drops, which is an experiment in retroactive public goods funding built by dOrg and supported by the Ethereum Foundation. 250K retroactive public goods funding round that is happening in Q1 2023. So I'm joined by Ori and Magenta, who are from dOrg and are administering the round. I got to say that DAO Drops is just beautiful. I love their website. I love their vibe. I love that they're experimenting with public goods. And so on the pod, we talk micro. We talk about DAO Drops in round one. We talk about, and then we expand it all the way out into the ultimate vision for DAO Drops and the collective vision that we have for crypto regenerating the world with public goods and a pluralistic mechanism of all these different DAOs and mechanisms that are going to be funding public goods. The ones off the top of my head that I'm thinking of here are DAO Drops, Optimism Retroactive Public Goods Funding, Gitcoin, CLR Fund, Giveth. There's a dozen others that are building this ecosystem of funding public goods and how crypto could, its main export to the world could be public goods. And then we kind of just focus in on DAO Drops and the experiment in retroactive public goods funding that they are running. And I just think it's such an exciting time to see a beautifully designed app by an org that I respect so much, dOrg, that is working on public goods funding. And so we get really into the why, what, how, who of DAO Drops. And for that reason, it's one of my favorite episodes on public goods funding that we've done so far. So Coordination, I hope that you enjoy this episode with DAO Drops.
Working in Web3 is awesome, but working outside of the typical W-2 employee structure is a deal breaker for so many. OPOLIS is helping the self-sovereign worker focus on what they do best, their work. Tax time is coming up. OPOLIS helps professionalize your business by helping you form an entity, generate proof of employment through pay stubs, and receive a W-2 at the end of the tax year. Are you self-employed and forced to spend money on expensive healthcare insurance with limited coverage? OPOLIS leverages group buying power through a community employment co-op, helping you save 20 to 50% on high-quality, affordable healthcare options through Cigna. And finally, OPOLIS's member owners share in OPOLIS's success and profits based on their work token holdings. You must be authorized to work inside the United States and select Canadian provinces to receive OPOLIS's benefits. Book a 30-minute free consultation with OPOLIS's experts and join OPOLIS by March 31st, 2023 to get 1,000 work and 1,000 bank tokens. Go to connect.opolis.co/bankless to get started. And if you're going to East Denver, make sure to stop by the OPOLIS booth or attend their Future of Work Summit hosted by OPOLIS. The Glow dollar is a new stablecoin with a very special property. As the market cap of Glow goes up, extreme poverty goes down. Glow is a dollar-backed, non-profit stablecoin that creates basic income for people living in extreme poverty. Glow is basically the same business model as USDC, with yield-generating treasuries on one side and a stablecoin on Ethereum on the other. But instead of being a for-profit company, Glow is a non-profit that donates 100% of all yields from the Glow Reserve to Give Directly's basic income program. Give Directly is a charity that gives people money, no strings attached, to people living in poverty, and is a charity that Vitalik has previously donated to and supported in the past. With Glow, you can reduce poverty just by holding a stablecoin. Glow is launching in early 2023, and you can join the waitlist at glowdollar.org/greenpill. That's glodollar.org/greenpill.
What's up, y'all? Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, maybe here.
So maybe we'll tee off with a round of intros. Magenta, you want to go first?
Oh, sure. I'm Magenta. I'm a project manager with dOrg. I'm based in New Hampshire, and I generally work on public goods and refi projects and also DAO tooling with both dOrg and Bloom Network.
Great. Go ahead, Ori.
Yeah, and I generally work on governance, DAOs, public goods. Have been in this space since getting my feet wet in 2015 with a cryptography professor I was working with at UVA on researching how you could layer in incentives into the Tor network, and then figuring out how you could do what we'd call DAOs now on Bitcoin, pre-smart contracts, and then got really excited when Ethereum launched. And since then have been writing smart contracts and then shifting over to like operating DAOs and kind of getting people organized around how to solve different coordination problems with mechanism design. So doing that mainly through dOrg with Magenta and 100 other awesome humans around the world. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, when I saw DAO Drops on Twitter and just the vibe of of coordination and public goods and this sort of vaporwave design for it. I was really, really excited about it. So yeah, can you tell us about DAO Drops and the retroactive public goods funding experiment that y'all are doing there?
Sure. So really briefly, DAO Drops is a pilot. It's an experiment in how to just put the decision-making power into the hands of the people who know best what to do with it, and then just dropping money into a mechanism that can aggregate their preferences and giving money out in that way. And so the framing for DAO Drops is to select and vote on people that have already contributed to the public good in the Ethereum ecosystem. So it's not like a grant system for future work, but it's more just a reward system for past work. And the idea is that if you evolve a mechanism like this, you do it repetitively, eventually continuously, then you could actually alter behavior and drive people to spend more time working on the public good because they have a credibly neutral, reliable mechanism that will reward them for doing so.
Okay, well, would love to dive into round one. It looks like it started on, or y'all launched on January 12th, and round one is distributing 250K USDC. So we're recording on February 23rd. Where are y'all? What's the status as of February 23rd of that first round?
So we're just finishing up the KYC and official information gathering from the final nominees. So we gathered a smaller subset of all of the nominees, kind of ruled out folks that weren't quite aligned with public goods funding, and kind of optimized for kind of under-visible, underfunded sort of corners of the ecosystem. And then so we're just finishing up that info gathering process, and then we'll load those finalists into the UI of the app. And then, like Ori described, the people who have voting points from their on-chain activity will be able to drop those points. It looks like a really cute video game, this part I'm excited for. And you can drop your points into the projects that you want to receive a percentage of the overall funding. And that will happen. We'll probably start that round in a week, maybe 2 weeks. And that'll run for, I think we have that running for 2 weeks, possibly 3.
Okay. So it's February 23rd right now. I've got a couple of ETH Denver episodes we're going to push out for the next week. And then this episode will probably go out the first week of March. So as the listeners, as this is hitting your ear, then will it be in the phase in which people can actually vote if they have on-chain history, which allows them to be voting? And it sounds like it's kind of like a cute, fun game where people can allocate capital to those projects retroactively. Is that right?
Yep. And that's about the right timing. So be sure to check in the app if you have voting points with multiple different wallet addresses. Likely, we pulled data from the DevCon and ETH Denver POAPs, from the Galaxy Shadowy Supercoders list. So if you've deployed smart contracts on Ethereum, and then lastly, if you participate in DAOs, we pulled the data list from DAO Drops, or sorry, Deep DAOs analytics. So, any of those activities, check the wallet addresses, and you probably have points. There's, I think, 113,000 wallet addresses, 130,000 that have points. So definitely take a look.
So the URL, if I'm listening to this, the URL I want to go to is daodrops.io. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I've got it up on a monitor right here, and I gotta say it's very beautiful and in vaporwave, and so I'm excited to see the actual user interface of the game. It looks like you all put a lot of polish into the design, so kudos on that.
Yeah, that was Colin. What's Colin's last name, Ori?
Spence.
Yeah. And Maria Buata.
Amazing. Well, great work, Colin and Maria. I'm a simp for vaporwave kind of design, so great work. Would love to talk a little bit about the origin of the project. So why retroactive public goods funding? How did this project come about? And in a world in which y'all are maximally successful, what does DAO Drops look like in, I don't know, round 15 or round 69? Play us forward a little bit in a world in which y'all are maximally successful, what DAO Drops looks like.
Definitely. So starting at the beginning, I guess the idea has probably been out there in different forms for a long time, but I think Vitalik did a good job of crystallizing it like a year or two with a blog post and a talk he gave on retroactive public goods funding. The idea being that most of public goods funding is forward-looking. It's people promising to do stuff for a grant, but it's actually really hard to vet how well people will do in advance and what the impact they have will be, if they're trustworthy to pull it off, if they're run into roadblocks. So it would be better potentially for certain kinds of work anyways, if you could just look in the past and reward people in some way for that. And that way, people who did kind of maybe minor things at the time, maybe on their spare time, that actually ended up having a big impact, could be rewarded. And so this could drive behavior going forward. And so I think Vitali kind of put out there as an idea, and then Optimism might have been the first team to really put it into action with their, I don't know the exact details. I think it was with their airdrop. They allocated a portion of the OP supply to projects, individuals that had contributed to the public good according to some sort of heuristic that they used. And then there's other kind of more sophisticated ideas out there for how RPGF could work in the future. And some of them include sort of tokens that you would buy ahead of time that might be not worth anything. And then if the action ends up being good for the public, then a retroactive public funder, which could be big organizations, high net worth individuals, or crowdfunded, could purchase those kind of tokens in the future. So we didn't go with one of those approaches because I think there's still like regulatory uncertainty and a lot of R&D that has to be done there. But we wanted to do something more straightforward. And most importantly for us is empowering the crowd as the evaluators, and doing so in such a way that we're measuring people's past on-chain activity to decide how much power different addresses have, and in a way that doesn't actually require us to check identity to know that it's one person, one account. Since the scoring is just based on actual things you've done, it doesn't matter if you did it through one address or through 7 addresses. So that's a little bit more about the context of the idea of public goods funding, and then the mechanism. And I guess the short version of the story of how we got here is that someone, Joe J from the EF, who was formerly at the EF, basically reached out to us with this problem of, the EF is a small organization. They have a lot of money that they have to get out fairly intelligently, fairly quickly. And how can this, small nonprofit know all of the areas in the ecosystem that most need resources? And so they we talked with them and brainstormed ideas, kind of went really wide at the whole design space, looked at a lot of stuff Gitcoin has done, stuff Optimism did, and CLR, several other projects, and then came away with this as kind of a good way to trial the idea, and to do it in a way that's round based, where there could be iteration, where we didn't have to like over design or overbuild the first time before we had any learnings. So the idea really is to do it polished and well thought through, but a little bit quick and dirty, right? Like a little bit, get it out there, ship, build in public, get feedback, do a report afterwards with what happened. We've already learned so much, and already like people have come to us with ideas, and we've amongst ourselves come up with them kind of as it's gone on. But yeah, like really kind of grateful that the EF was willing to run this experiment with us and kind of give us a little drop of funding to kind of get out there, and hopefully eventually this could, I guess, to answer your question about the grand vision, I would love it if this went really well and then round 2 was slightly bigger and got more sponsors and on. And eventually this was, at least for the Ethereum ecosystem, one of the key places that they could just drop money, and then they'll know that there's an intelligent swarm that's going to allocate it to where it needs to go. Some other kind of future visions is that mechanisms like this, whether it's us doing it or not, should be kind of really core to large ecosystems. Anything from like L1s to large DeFi DAOs, or even like networked states. You need a way to kind of allocate resources towards network goods. And so we think that this is like a tool that you could eventually use for, like, let's say taking the whatever taxation your system has, or inflation. So like monetary or fiscal policy, it could be like a decentralized way of allocating resources that are collected in whatever manner an ecosystem has access to.
Thanks so much, Ori. Magenta, anything to add?
Oh, one of the areas I think future-wise that's interesting for this project to instigate and also develop itself is around algorithmic governance. So how you pull on-chain data, or even in more real-world applications, real-world experience that people have, to make sure that diverse stakeholders and diverse mixes of different types of experts or stakeholders are able to make decisions about where finance flows in an ecosystem or a coalition, that sort of thing. And as we run analytics on-chain activity and start to have all kinds of things of interesting combinations of that, use machine intelligence to know what would be learn over time, what are good combinations of types of diversity that you need to limit bad consequences, or a certain small group of people having a disproportionate amount of resources and attention in an ecosystem that kind of like shoots the ecosystem in the foot, right? Because they're like missing really key ingredients, or in the case of like real world public goods, messing with like not getting the market dynamics quite correct with actually rebalancing local ecosystems and the whole market dynamics of that regionally and globally. So yeah, the whole field of algorithmic governance, I think, is like very underexplored. And I think this project like opens up a window into what's possible there.
Yeah, amen. Well, I'm just so long on collective intelligence for network goods. I envision a pluralistic infrastructure for funding public goods where there's a pluralism of mechanisms: quadratic funding, retroactive public goods funding, give backs, dominance assurance contracts, probably a bunch of mechanisms that haven't even been invented yet. And people will be earning from completing public goods from these pluralistic set of mechanisms. And each mechanism might be good at X and Y, but bad at Z and A, B, and C. And it's the pluralism of mechanisms that allows each mechanism to do one thing and do it well. And I think that like I'm really Aaron McMillan and I. Aaron started CLR Fund, and of course I'm a founder of Gitcoin, have been talking about this idea of practical pluralism for a long time, about how these public goods funding mechanisms can kind of coexist with each other, and inspired by the Ethereum clients and how they have client diversity with one another, can kind of coexist. And the client diversity at the base layer of the Ethereum network creates an anti-fragility in the Ethereum network, because if one client gets messed up, then the network doesn't fork. And the same thing should be true with public goods funding, is that you should have a pluralism of mechanisms that support public goods in different ways. And I'm just really here for it. Like the gestalt of all the different mechanisms together is really cool. And I think the ultimate sort of pluralistic thing that we could do is all be supporting each other in order to creating this world of public goods together. And I really believe that crypto can regenerate the world when we've got a pluralism of these mechanisms and they're well funded and starting to scale to funding the world's public goods. So I think that my vision is somewhat aligned with DAO Drops vision. But I'll be curious if you have any sort of reaction to that, or to that prompt in any way.
Yeah, I definitely think that composability is key, that we're all running these little experiments and they're all in an aggregate scale, like rapidly iterating, spreading or dying. And so we have this nice kind of like evolutionary process right now running, where the best things get copied and the things that didn't quite work wither away. And so I think the fact that they're happening on these common substrates of like open public blockchains makes the composability like really compelling and natural. So in the same way that the first couple airdrops, Uniswap, and then the others, they could quickly copy that mechanism, and they realized for a little bit they thought it worked, and then it wasn't working as well, and people have like refined the way it happens. Gitcoin obviously had a way more sophisticated one, because they were able to learn from the pluses and minuses of past approaches. And I think there's still a lot of missing pieces, and that's why the conversations are important that happen between projects like Gitcoin, CLR, DAO Drops, because ultimately we could be reducing the work by reusing common components. And I think like a really good example of this, I've been talking to Holke a lot at Hypercerts out of Protocol Labs. So
Yeah.
I think something like that's really cool where Gitcoin could plug into that. And maybe,
Real
you could
quick,
do a
can we
better
just
job.
explain what hyper?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to explain what hypercerts were to the audience.
Yeah, let's both try it because I'm gonna do a bad job. But so my attempt will be it's like a way to have an on-chain certification that you did something and you don't necessarily know if that thing is had impact yet, but it's basically a tokenized representation of like some attempt at public good that you did, and then it could be purchased in the future by retroactive public funder. Did I do a good job? I'm curious what you would say, because it's a fairly new concept.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I would describe a hypercert as like a carbon credit, but on any impact vector. So like I took 10 tons of carbon out of the atmosphere, or we could have a hypercert for I fixed 10 potholes in my street. I funded 10 months of open source software, and so whatever the plurality of types of capital there are, whether it's spiritual capital or intellectual capital or material capital, you can mint a hypercert for it. And then once you've got impact DAOs that are issuing hypercerts, if you can engineer buy pressure for those hypercerts, then what you've done is you've given every impact DAO, people are creating value, a way to capture value because they're printing hypercerts, and with buy pressure, that means that you're generating revenue by generating impact. And it gives every impact DAO a business model from there and like a granular way of tracking impact, which is important for impact evaluation, but also, like the buy pressure is important for funding public goods. And so the combination of these things is that with retroactive public goods funding, if I believe in the present that I'm able to generate $100 million exit for investors by just supporting public goods, then like VCs and angels will start investing in public goods on the expectation that in 10 years that between like DAO Drops and optimism and all these other things, they'll be able to have $100 million exit. And that allows in the present people to like invest in those projects seeking that exit in the future. And hypercerts could be like a way of connecting the impact that you've created now to that future payout in the future. That's the way I sort of stitch the ideas together. But as I'm saying it, I feel like Charlie and Always Sunny, like I'd like kind of like really try to stitch it together in a crazy way. But the sketch is there. Like I think the skeleton for how Web3 can fund public goods in a pluralistic way is all sort of there. What's your reaction to that?
Totally. I think hypersets are really nice because they're a data layer and it's really agnostic to what you do with the data. So the way I've understood it is you could have evaluators of different sorts and different sorts of networks or protocols, like, or even centralized bodies acting as evaluators. And then there's an even different layer, which is the funders, right? So it's nice because it's this building block stack where any one part can kind of fail or be experimented with, and it only kind of like improves the whole. And so I think hypersets are really nice as a bottom layer. And then you have things like verifiable credentials. Another cool project that reached out to us, like the Ethereum attestation service. And I know there's other, like a lot of projects in the like verifiable credential space. And so, and then you have things like Claros where you can have like these subjectivity oracles. And so I really like the way things are going right now where everyone is in their little pocket of this net and is like, really trying hard to make it work and then seeing how they can link up to other parts. And every once in a while, I think we'll have these breakthroughs where it's like the Gitcoin quadratic funding, where it's like that was one of many ideas that were talked about in the space, but it was able like to have the right UX, the right mechanism design, and the right kind of storytelling to make it actually like impact the real world, right, and not just be another idea that's floating around in the mechanism design space.
Yeah. The other thing I would add in that is that those data layers and hypercerts also present the potential for peer learning. So ways to access the data, like I heard a person from Agroforest DAO describe, like if I was working with a new seed because the climate in my region is shifting and I have to find plants that are adapted to that and learn how to grow them for the first time, I can look into the hypercerts and see who has used that in their verification of carbon credits or some kind of food system sovereignty thing. And then maybe even contact them or find how to get in touch and like ask for tips on growing this, or maybe that's packed into the hypercert. So, and like the collective sense making of that and also the potential for like IRL community adoption and leadership with these sorts of tools is the other kind of potential that comes to mind with these, open system collaborative approaches to it. Because once those people grab hold of those tools, they're not technology anchored, right? They have like a kind of a different mindset. And so the creative ways that they use those, yeah, I'm just excited to see this space now that the UX is starting to be more and more usable by people who aren't engineers. That just opens up a whole nother possibility space of like how the public goods funding tools get used, but also the leadership diversifies of who is kind of directing the development of them. So that's a really exciting like cusp of development that's I think happening right now across the Ethereum ecosystem.
Yeah, totally. Anything else that's in the DAO Drops vision or the world that you want to create that that you want to say within the next 10 minutes?
Yeah, I'll piggyback off what Magenta said about taking this kind of outside the crypto space into IRL. So I think like we and a lot of people in the space see crypto as the natural testing ground for these things because they're using smart contracts, they're using cryptocurrency. And so it makes sense to test those with public goods funding in those communities, right? But people like shouldn't forget that that's not the goal, right? Like that's one step along the way to the goal. But for us, like like I was saying earlier, the vision of having like L1s and things like that, use mechanisms like this to fund network goods is like one massive important stepping stone. And then we don't want to delay for too long the extension of this into like communities that have nothing to do with crypto. And so I think Magenta and I both in different ways are involved in these IRL communities where people are experimenting with provisioning the commons in new ways. And we want to be, part of the force kind of bringing crypto in light ways, smart contracts into those spaces. And so like, I think some interesting people reached out about using DAO Drops, like running it for like different kinds of IRL public goods funding. And just generally, like I think currency design, quadratic voting, and all of these different things, like it's really interesting to start to see where are the first places, what are going to be the first dominoes to fall of where people are willing to experiment with this offline or outside of crypto. So, municipalities or like federated co-ops, or maybe there's like larger scale kind of like large NGOs or corporates or other kinds of communities like online communities that find this useful, that, as the kind of different building blocks get into place, like wallet UX improves, social recovery, account abstraction, all these things that we've imagined for a long time become more possible. And a lot of times as crypto people, we forget about that. We just assume like, oh yeah, like there's too high a barrier to entry, but actually that barrier to entry is going down all the time. So it becomes more and more possible, like every couple months that go by, to try something out like this that touches like worlds outside of our smart contract crypto bubbles.
Yeah, for sure. I remember I did this experiment with Zach Herring and Katie Johnson, who are two of my compatriots back when Gitcoin was at Consensus. And we just YOLO'd together a 25K round and a completely new platform for doing quadratic funding in downtown Boulder, Colorado. In mid 2020, we had saw that our local community, that the retail businesses on Main Street had seen their rent dropped by or sorry, not the rent dropped. Their rent stayed the same, which is part of the problem. And the foot traffic for these businesses went down 99%. And so we did a quadratic funding round for downtown Boulder. And, we abstracted all the blockchain in the back. It was kind of like a blockchain mullet, Web2 UX in the front. And we were able to fund a quadratic funding round with a comic book shop and a yoga studio and a bookstore and a couple other downtown stores in Boulder. And it was just so cool to see this mechanism that was prototyped in crypto as an ecosystem development tool be used for real world public goods. And, it was much more nimble, agile, and effective than I think what the local municipal government could put together. It was also way less administrative overhead. And I would love to see that, like DAO Drops and retroactive public goods funding and quadratic funding, more and more people hit Main Street public goods, because public goods are good and like they're an end in themselves. But I also think crypto has a reputational damage. Like we shouldn't talk about how crypto is good for the world until it actually is good for the world. And this can be like an export, like the national export or like the network state export of crypto can be public goods. At least that's how I would state my vision. I don't know how that jives with y'all's.
That's sweet. I like it.
Well, anything else to say about the macro vision? I guess I'll just ask the question that I asked 10 minutes ago. In a world in which you're maximally successful, what does this look like? What is the dent in the universe that this has over the next 10 years?
Yeah, so I think the point for me of focusing so intensely on mechanism design for like the way money works and the way money flows is actually to bring money like into the background. So I think today for so many people, whether you're working in like for-profit sector, public goods, nonprofit, government, like money is so front and center to everything you do, like both organizations and individuals. Like you work, you spend, and everything's a calculation, with money. And so I think like the big impact to have is if something like this can run in the background and then just be silently allocating money to all the places where they're needed most, where there's been a lot of impact and there could be more impact if money is sprinkled there. So what we want to see, what we want to do away with, like the 10-year vision, is like grant writing is not a thing. Like organizations that are doing public good don't have to spend 60% of their time asking for money, right? They can just have like kind of automated flows, reporting what they do, building in public, social media, et cetera. And then various mechanisms, not one grand mechanism, but like various mechanisms that they're in, like this like internet of public goods or something like that, are spewing out various kinds of tokens at them, and they're automatically kind of like reinvesting them in the places where they need it to go. So I think that's what it is. It's like kind of cybernetic, quietly humming, like money forest, where like money's just like actually growing on trees and like going, but intelligently growing. And so to get more concrete about how DAO Drops could play a role in that is that I think eventually we don't want to see it be rounds. We would like it to be like a continuous flowing stream. So imagine if there's just this like black hole, anyone can throw money into it, and then it's just getting spewed out in real time to like all these different like hundreds of thousands of organizations and individuals. And as they're doing activity, like if they do more public good, the evaluator network starts to like point at them and their stream goes up. And if they stop doing good, they, go MIA, their stream gradually like winds down. And so you could think of it as like a UBI for all the different like micro activities people are doing that contribute back to various sorts of public good.
Yeah, I'm in. I would, I agree with all that, except I'll use the word intelligently routing value instead of spewing out money would be the way I would frame it.
I like it.
Not to troll you too hard. Go. And like, sorry, one thing I just wanted to add was like, it's easy to like, I'm a systems nerd and I get into all these like complex systems, but I just want to like collapse it down to the like the agent level view, which is just like, if you can make money for supporting public goods, then you can quit your corporate job, you can quit your like sort of like private job, and you can just work for the public, and we can pay our mortgage by working for the public. So I just want to like collapse that down into like the agent level design. Also, that's kind of what I view this as creating an incentive system for the world.
Totally. And I think something that really upsets me is to see so many of the smartest, hardest working people I know, like spending all of their energy and like investing it into systems that like are not doing good for the world or are actively doing like harm to the world. And they're just like, yeah, but that's the only way I can keep making X $1,000 a year. And that's like, what else am I going to do? It's so expensive to live in the city that I like. So, if there could be alternatives that say, hey, like you're saying, you can quit this corporate job. You can go do stuff that like is interesting to you and helps people. That's game changing if you can do that at scale.
There's this quote that really slaps hard for me. The best minds of my generation are thinking about how to make people click ads at Facebook.
That sums it up.
I don't know. It like hurts my soul a little bit to hear that. Magenta, it felt like you had something to add, and I'm sorry if we veered away from the point you were going to make, but I wanted to give you space to say it.
No, all good. I'm just grinning huge. It's so fun to be here and listen and dialogue with you both. What was I going to say? I don't know. it was a while back. But also one thing that comes to mind is in that kind of open, ongoing grants sort of system, I often think like this came up in our round too. So it takes a bit of effort to make a Gitcoin grant listing, right? And we have like separate listings on DAO Drops. And so one thing I'd like to see is more, I guess hypersearch is one solution, but also when a project has a profile for public goods funding on these different platforms, to not have to create that multiple times. I think my meta from Metagame is working on a kind of open profile system. I think they're using Ceramic, but something like that could be a potential solution. That just came to my mind in the course of talking about, because these systems are so much better, right? Like you can see each other, you can build relationships. Where in like a competitive corporate world or a nonprofit world, you have like these closed doors about in the corporate context, you get between divisions between sectors and not a good flow of different types of expertise and industry collaboration. And on the nonprofit side, there's just totally closed process where you can't see the other people. It takes you 3 months to write an application. So yeah, there's that shared profile of projects or individuals that are hey, I'm available for public funding. Would be really helpful. And maybe I had another thing, but I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Well, I know that interop between all these different public goods funding mechanisms is going to be something that is in the Web3 ethos. So I hope to see someone building a grant aggregator where I can apply to DAO Drops and apply to CLR Fund and apply to Giveth and apply to Gitcoin and sync my profiles across all of them. There's this XKCD comic, though, where there's like 11 different markdown standards is the first panel of the comic. And then the next panel is like, someone should make a standard that's all the standards. And then the result is like, there's 12 different standards. And like, I worry that that's the world that we're going towards, especially with the modular architecture of L2s and everything on Ethereum. But even if like the systems can talk to each other and you can transpose between one standard or another, I think that would be a step forward for the space. So that's another area where I think that our visions are aligned.
Yeah, definitely transposing them and just not choosing a winner, just being open to, you can plug in all these different identities. And then over time, the ones that are just like more useful for different areas can just keep being popular. So yeah, I agree. We won't get to like a clean, like, there's one system for this, one system for that, and they just touch each other. It's definitely going to be a messy road, but it's going to get like better progressively.
Yeah, it's all right, because that messiness and that chaotic sort of co-evolution and gene transfer and competition between all these things is how progress happens. Like I view very much Web3 in an evolutionary perspective, and I think that there's going to be an opportunity for cross-pollination for these mechanisms. Like what I really want to see is not just like interoperability of grants, though, is coordination mechanism interoperability. Like could I take DAO Drop style ArchPGF and put it on Gitcoin grant stack? Or Gitcoin grant style quadratic funding and take it to some other grants registry. Like the interoperability of the mechanisms, I think gets really interesting in a world in which all these ecosystems are coordinating. Like basically that just allows each community, each holon, whether it's like a DAO or a layer one or the city of Boulder, to just choose whatever coordination mechanism it wants and like install it in their community. And that's the world that I'm here for. Because like I don't believe that there's going to be one ultimate coordination mechanism for all of humanity. There's going to be all these like different rings and like groups of humans that have different values, and there's going to be different coordination mechanisms that are best for each of them. Or maybe like a top 3 where like most DAOs in 2026 will have quadratic funding and RPGF and givebacks and assurance contracts. Like I don't think that there's one coordination mechanism for all coordination out there. And so that pluralism I think is like important as a base principle.
Totally.
Yeah, and it supports anti-brittleness as well. It's scary if you're just relying on one system, if it goes down or gets corrupt, for sure.
Yeah, tell me about it. Well, I think that we've gone wide, we've gone macro. I want to collapse the down to the micro, which is DAO Drops round 1. So by the time I am listening to this in early March, there's going to be at DAOdrops.io, I can go and I'm going to be able to vote in DAO Drops RPGF round 1 if I have been participating in a DAO, if I've been to event ecosystems and I have a POAP for it, if I've deployed smart contracts. And that's the main thing that I want the audience to like. I want them to participate in that. But is there anything else to say about round 1 and the actual mechanics of the flow of the round and the DAO Drops experiment itself?
Yeah, so like everything you just said, completely that's actually the full picture of this next round, or is this next phase of the round. And one thing I just want to put out there is that people should really, look at the projects. The web app kind of randomly generates the order, but I think it's important to basically look at the different ideas out there and distribute points like according to what you think is fair, right? And so the thing that we're trying to avoid with the design of this, which the curation step and the nomination step were really key parts of, is turning it into a popularity contest. And that's one of the hard things, especially when you're decentralizing to the crowd, is how do you avoid kind of people evaluating based on like selfish or like social grouping kind of metrics. And so that's something that we'd love to get feedback on once people go through the experience. And so I would definitely encourage people to talk about their experience publicly, positive or negative or any other way, once they go through and click through it. But yeah, it's really like meant to be fast and people can make small decisions. And the idea is that we aggregate all these small decisions. So no one has to be an expert, but everyone who has those points is obviously like somewhat knowledgeable in some corner of the ecosystem. And then once you allocate all your points, you just click the button and it's going to generate a message to sign. And so it's no gas because all of the scoring kind of just gets aggregated by the app and then the money gets dropped all at once. And that way, that was also like a design concept to increase participation as much as possible, to not have the complexity of gas on L1 or some sort of, choosing which L2 to go on. And so in future rounds, definitely the idea is to bring more on-chain, abstract away gas as much as possible. But for this one, we thought it'd be easiest for everyone if it's like, hey, just sign in, take 2 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes of your day to be a small part of like making this decision.
Yeah.
The only other piece I would mention is, and this is for the next round, but it may occur to you as you're playing with the app. We're looking for more data providers to again iterate on and improve the algorithm, or what on-chain data we pull and why. And then also sponsors for the next round, so that there's a diversity of people contributing funds into the next one. So data providers and sponsors or financial contributors are two things that we're looking for as we go into the developing the next round.
Amazing. Yeah, I should if you're interested, I'm no longer at Gitcoin. I've disaffiliated because it's like a DAO and everything. But I could introduce you to the people who are working on data science within Gitcoin. I think that y'all might have some similar problems to solve. So
that'd be amazing.
That
could
be cool. Well, we've got 5 minutes left. Is there anything I didn't ask that y'all want to say?
Oh, I just want to hang out for a weekend and talk about regional regeneration and all. Yeah, just nerd out on all these things, but also make them happen.
Yeah. That's how I feel also. So like early on when I was still at Gitcoin, we used to think about like interop with other projects as like social interop. And then you would do like technology interop, which is like our systems integrate with each other. And then like economic interop, which is, some to the extent that any of us is generating revenue, like sharing that with each other. And you start with social interop. And so one of the things that's been really important for me over time, and it's the reason why Gitcoin hosts Shelling Point, and we had a conference in 2020 called Sustain Web3, and is like convening the people, And once you convene the smart people who are well intentioned and have the resources, and hopefully like a pluralism of like a diverse group of people, not just like the same old representation that I think that we've seen too often, is that once you create that container for the social stuff, like the economic and the technological interop, and the momentum flows from there. And that's why I started this podcast, is to try to like stimulate that movement and that action. So the GreenPilled podcast is one way to do it. Shelling Point at ETH Denver is coming up, and that's like our Regen Web3 conference. There's Funding the Commons, and it'd be great to see DAO Drops integrated into all the Regen Web3 refi ecosystem. Regens Unite is another one. There's a bunch of great people who are working to stimulate this movement. And I'll just end by saying that I want to live in a world where we're rotating capital, talent, and attention towards Regen Web3, like away from the pump and dumps and the Ponzi's into Regen Web3, of which public goods funding is a big part of it. So I think we'll keep doing experiments and having the conversation, and trying to meme that world into existence. And that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm glad to be at the dance with you all. So thank you for DAO Drops. It's really exciting for me, and I can't wait to see what y'all learn from round one. Any response to that rant or anything else you want to say before we wrap?
Definitely second everything you said. I think the community like that we're building here is really important, and keeping that pluralistic and diverse, because we don't want to make mistakes in having tunnel vision around particular ideas that come from a particular subset of the population. And so that's why I think like the Regen branch of crypto has been really great for kind of bringing the pluralistic nature, because I think DeFi and NFT land and like scared away a lot of the people who are excited about decentralized governance at first. It kind of like washed out a lot of those people because it got so loud. But now that's gotten quieter, kind of thankfully to the bear market. And so now the Regen thing can flourish. And I've seen this in person also at Regens Unite, and going to go to the Crypto Commons Hub soon and check out more of these events in person. Funding the Commons in Paris at the summer.
Yeah. Some of these I wasn't even, I work full time in this space. I wasn't even aware of some of those. So we should compile a list of all the different circles of regens that you can join. And what I really want to do is like, if we can route the newbies to the next market cycle, if we can route the new entrants to the ecosystem to Regen Web3 and around all the Ponzi's and the pump and dumps and like straight into those communities, man, that's a fucking public good for the space in itself. So it legitimizes crypto, but it also routes the capital and attention to like where it really matters. So maybe that's something we could start collaborating on.
Totally. Yeah. How people first come into contact with the space is so crucial. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just the only other thing I'd add listening to that is the importance of foregrounding grassroots participation in refi. It's still very missing from the, for example, carbon focus or the technology first focus. And then also feminine leadership. I still find even refi is very bro-y, like culture-wise. And I don't know how to articulate it exactly, but there's a missing of the feminine like ways of organizing and like creating a technological business container there's a lot of possibility there that I think is not as like loud as it could be across the space. So that grassroots and women voices in refi specifically, I think more of that will be like nutritive in a very good way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a criticism of the space that's totally valid is that it's got a lot of overlap with people who are privileged enough to have computer science degrees, and like if it looks more like the global South and like the actual communities that it serves, then I think that there's like a symmetry there that gets really nice, and doing it across a bunch of vectors, not just like gender and like race and geography, but many different types of collective or of intelligence. Is that pluralism, I think, is an important vector of pluralism as well. Yeah, well, I really enjoyed this episode. I'm so thrilled about DAO Drops, and as someone who's been working on public goods for a few years, welcome to the party. Really excited to have you, and can't wait to see how DAO Drops evolves over the next several years. So, Ori, Magenta, thank you so much for joining me on the GreenPilled Pod.
For sure.
Yeah,
Thank
had a
you
great
too.
time.